My wife lied about her affair for years, until I showed her the DNA test. She begged me to stay, but I already had my exit. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and for most of my adult life I thought I'd built the perfect little family. I grew up in a small town where people measured happiness by how solid your foundation was. A stable job, a roof that didn't leak, and someone waiting at home who loved you for who you were. That's what I wanted. And somehow, I thought I'd found it with Emma. We met in college. She was everything I wasn't. Confident, social, the kind of woman who lit up every room she walked into. I was the quiet one in the back, the guy who took life seriously even when I didn't have to. We balanced each other out, or at least that's what I believed. When we got married, I made her a promise. You'll never have to worry about anything. I meant it. I worked my way up in a logistics company, taking every overtime shift I could, just so she could stay home and raise our kids, our little boy, Ethan, and our daughter, Lily. I told myself the long hours were worth it every time I came home to Ethan's drawings on the fridge and Lily's tiny arms around my neck. Our house wasn't fancy, but it felt alive. Saturday pancakes, movie nights, Emma humming while folding laundry. Those were my treasures. I used to lie in bed, watching her breathe, thinking, this is what peace looks like. But lately, the peace feels thinner. There are moments, quiet ones, where something doesn't add up. Her phone lights up late at night and she turns it face down. She used to laugh when I walked into the room. Now, sometimes she just locks her screen. It's small things. Things I shouldn't care about. But sometimes, the smallest things are the ones that start to rot the foundation. And I can't shake the feeling that something in mine just cracked. It started with what sounded harmless. Girls' nights, spa breaks, self-care dinners. At first I encouraged it. Emma had spent years at home raising our kids while I buried myself in work. She deserved to breathe, to feel human again. I even offered to watch the kids and told her, go have fun, you've earned it. But little by little, the details stopped lining up. She'd dress up in ways I hadn't seen in years. Tight dresses, makeup that shimmered under the hallway light, perfume I didn't recognize. Once, she walked out wearing heels I'd never seen before. I laughed and said, when did you get those? She froze, then said, oh, these old things? Had them forever. The tag was still on the sole. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I'd forgotten what she owned, or that she was finally taking care of herself again. Still, something inside me kept whispering, you're losing her, and you don't even know why. The nights stretched longer. Her dinners turned into overnight sleepovers, and when I asked about them, she'd sigh, roll her eyes, and say, do you have any idea how exhausting it is to be with the kids all day? Can I not have one night to myself? I'd nod, feeling guilty for even asking. Then one evening she came home late, past midnight, with her hair messy and lipstick faded. I asked if everything was okay. She didn't answer right away, just walked past me muttering, you're overthinking again. The next morning, a small moment made my chest tighten. She left her phone face down on the counter again, vibrating with a message. I didn't touch it, but I couldn't stop staring at it. That sound, the soft hum of a new text, felt louder than my own heartbeat. And for the first time in my marriage, I realized I didn't trust her silence anymore, but I told myself I was imagining things until a friend said something that changed everything. It happened on a quiet Tuesday. I was dropping my son, Ethan, off at school when one of Emma's close friends, Hannah, waved me down in the parking lot. She smiled casually and said, tell Emma I hope her weekend trip went well. She looked so happy in that picture, I froze. What trip? I asked, trying to sound casual. Hannah's smile faltered. Oh, didn't she tell you? She said you were cool with it. I laughed it off, pretending I knew. But as I walked back to my car, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the ignition. Emma hadn't mentioned a trip. She'd said she was visiting her mom for the weekend because her mom wasn't feeling well. That night, when I brought it up, she blinked like I'd just accused her of a crime. What trip? She said flatly. Hannah mentioned. Hannah's confused, she cut in, her voice sharp. You always twist things, Jake. You're paranoid lately. Is something wrong with you? Her words stung. I hated confrontation, especially with her. So I backed off. I told her I was sorry, that I didn't mean to sound suspicious. She hugged me tightly after that, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You know I'd never hurt you." But that night, when she fell asleep beside me, I couldn't stop replaying Hannah's tone, that innocent, offhand mention of the weekend trip. When the house went quiet, I opened our joint bank app. There it was, a charge from a hotel 2 hours away, dated the same weekend she'd said she was at her mom's. My heart sank. Still, I told myself maybe she'd gone with friends. Maybe there was an explanation. But as I stared at the transaction, my gut whispered the truth I didn't want to face. Whatever that weekend was, it wasn't innocent. A few weeks passed and I convinced myself to move on. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that maybe the hotel charge was work-related, or part of a surprise she couldn't tell me about yet. But doubt doesn't fade. It multiplies. One night we were sitting on the couch watching TV. Emma was scrolling through her phone, half smiling at something. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. It was a message from her. "I miss you already." I frowned and looked over at her, still sitting right there beside me. Her eyes flicked down to her own phone. In less than a second, her face went pale. Sorry," she stammered, snatching it. "That was for my sister." I stared at her. "Your sister?" "Yes," she said quickly, forcing a laugh. "We were talking earlier about her trip, and I hit the wrong name, okay?" Her voice shook slightly. I wanted to believe her, but something about her reaction didn't match the story. Her hands trembled as she tucked her hair behind her ear, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, while she showered, I sat alone in the living room staring at her phone on the counter. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. But I noticed something else. She'd added a new lock, a passcode. She'd never done that before. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened, making breakfast, humming softly like always. But every sound felt hollow. Every smile looked rehearsed. I started noticing the patterns then, how she'd take her phone to the bathroom or how she'd set it face down at dinner. Each gesture was small, but together they screamed something I didn't want to hear. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like her husband anymore. I felt like an outsider living in my own home, and deep down, I knew this wasn't paranoia. It was proof waiting to surface. A few months later, Emma told me she was pregnant. She cried when she showed me the test, said it was a miracle that she hadn't even been trying. I was stunned, but I smiled anyway, pulling her into my arms. Maybe this was what we needed, a restart, a reason to rebuild whatever had been slipping between us. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to. The months rolled by, and I threw myself into being the perfect husband. I took more shifts at work, cooked dinner when she was tired, and rubbed her back every night before bed. But something felt off. She was different this time, colder, guarded. Sometimes she'd flinch when I reached for her phone or asked how she was feeling. When our daughter, Lily, was born, the hospital room filled with light. I cried the moment I saw her, tiny, beautiful, perfect. But then, the nurse hesitated while recording the medical notes. She asked, "Are you sure you're the father?" I laughed awkwardly, confused. "Of course I am." She blinked, apologetic. "It's just, her blood type doesn't match either of yours exactly. It's probably nothing." I brushed it off, but the words, "it's probably nothing," kept echoing. At home, everyone commented how Lily didn't look much like me. Different eyes, different skin tone. Even Emma's mom joked once, "She's definitely not her father's clone like Ethan was." Emma laughed a little too loud, then changed the subject. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Lily's tiny face while she slept. I wanted to silence that voice in my head, the one whispering that something didn't fit. "She's mine," I told myself. "She has to be." But as Emma rolled over and faced the wall, her phone glowing under the blanket, I realized I was no longer fighting for love. I was fighting to believe in a lie that was starting to fall apart. And once that doubt was born, it wouldn't die. It happened on a rainy Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world feels quiet enough to think. Emma had taken the kids to her mother's house, saying they'd be gone all day. I was cleaning the living room when I heard a soft chime from the bookshelf, her old iPad. I'd forgotten we even owned it. She hadn't used it in years, but apparently it was still connected to her iCloud. Curiosity got the better of me. I turned it on. A dozen photo notifications flashed across the screen. Recent uploads. My stomach twisted. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't. But then one thumbnail froze me in place. It was a picture of Lily. She was a newborn in the photo, wrapped in the same pink blanket from the hospital. But the arms holding her weren't mine. They belonged to a man I'd never seen before. Dark hair, strong jaw, smiling down at her like she was his whole world. And the caption, simple, casual, family first. My chest went numb. I scrolled down, hands trembling. More pictures followed. Emma and that man at a cafe, laughing. A mirror selfie. Her wearing that same perfume I hadn't recognized. Then a message thread popped up, syncing automatically. Her words glowed on the screen. "She looks so much like you." I felt my knees give out. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was something deeper. Something built, hidden, nurtured. I stared at that man's face for a long time. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew everything about him that mattered. He had the life I thought I'd built, the family I thought was mine. When Emma came home that night, I kissed her forehead, tucked the kids in, and smiled like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Because now, I had a name for my pain. And I planned to let her bury herself in her own lies before I ever said a word. After that day, something inside me shut off. I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I just went quiet. I smiled when I had to, kissed her goodnight, and played the role of the doting husband. But every word out of her mouth sounded like static now, every "I love you" echoing against. The lie she'd built brick by brick, I started documenting. Everything. Quietly, patiently. Screenshots from her iCloud. Photos of receipts. Timestamps from her girls' nights. I even created a hidden email folder labeled Insurance. Because I knew someday, when I finally snapped, I'd need proof. Not anger. Emma must have sensed a shift in me because she changed her tactics. Suddenly, she was affectionate again. Asking about my day, making my favorite meals, sitting beside me on the couch like old times. But it wasn't love. It was maintenance. Damage control. One night, as she laughed at something on her phone, I asked softly, "Who's that?" She froze for half a second before saying, "Just Megan. She's sending me memes." "Megan?" I repeated. "The one you haven't talked to in months?" Her face didn't change, but her voice did. Sharper now. "Jake, you've really got to stop with this jealousy thing. It's getting toxic." Jealousy. That's what she called it. Not betrayal. Not guilt. Just my insecurities. I remember going outside that night, standing barefoot on the porch as rain started to fall, letting it soak through my shirt. I needed the cold. I needed something real against all the fake. From then on, I learned to perform. I hugged her at family dinners, played with the kids in front of her, and nodded whenever she said she loved me. But every time I looked into her eyes, I didn't see my wife anymore. I saw a stranger rehearsing lines from a play I didn't agree to be in, and I wasn't planning revenge yet, but I was planning truth. After weeks of pretending, I finally decided I needed certainty. Proof that would silence every shred of doubt, or destroy me completely. It started with a late-night search. How to order a home DNA kit. I stared at the screen for nearly an hour before clicking Buy Now. I told myself it was for peace of mind, but deep down, I already knew what I'd find. A few days later, the small white box arrived. I told Emma it was for a school project Ethan's class was doing about genetics. She barely looked up from her phone, just said, "That's cute." I took Ethan's sample first, then Lily's. My hands trembled when I swabbed her cheek. She laughed, this innocent, bubbly laugh that made my chest tighten with guilt. She didn't deserve any of this. None of it was her fault. I mailed the kit and waited. Days felt like months. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse jumped. Every night I'd lie awake beside Emma, watching the glow of her screen reflect off her face as she texted someone I refused to name. Then, one afternoon, while parked outside work, my phone vibrated. "Your DNA results are ready." My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unlock it. I clicked the link. Waited. And then it appeared. Probability of paternity. 0.00%. The world went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the weight of it all crashing down at once. Everything. The sleepless nights, the girls' trips, the photo of that man holding her, had led to this moment. And now, I finally had what I'd been too afraid to admit. Lily wasn't mine. That night, when Emma hugged me, whispering she loved me, I whispered it back, calmly, because I wasn't going to destroy her with rage. I was going to end her with truth. The days after the DNA test felt unreal, like I was living someone else's life. I still woke up, made breakfast, kissed my kids goodbye, but it was mechanical now. Every routine that used to mean love had turned into muscle memory. I'd look at Lily eating cereal, her little feet kicking under the table, and my heart would ache so violently I thought it might give out. She'd smile up at me saying, "Daddy, look," and I'd force a smile back, because how could I not? She was innocent, completely innocent, but every time I heard her call me Dad, it cut a little deeper. It was like holding onto sunlight that I knew wasn't mine to keep. Emma must have sensed the distance. She started trying harder, making my favorite meals, planning family movie nights, even dressing up for dinner like she used to. But the more she tried, the more it felt like I was watching a ghost reenact the best parts of my past. Once she came up behind me while I was washing dishes, wrapped her arms around my waist and whispered, "I miss us." I stared out the window, the bubbles slipping through my fingers, and said softly, "Yeah, me too." That night, I sat in the dark long after everyone fell asleep. The DNA email glowed on my phone screen again. I'd read it so many times the words didn't even look real anymore. 0.0%. That number followed me everywhere, on receipts, on clocks, on license plates. My brain turned grief into obsession. I couldn't eat. I couldn't work. My coworkers asked if I was okay, and I'd just nod, pretending everything was fine. Inside, I was hollow. I thought pain was supposed to scream. But this kind of pain doesn't. It just settles in your bones. And as I watched my wife sleep beside me, unaware that her whole world was already collapsing, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow." I start planning my exit. Once I decided to leave, something inside me shifted. The grief didn't vanish. It just turned cold, focused. I stopped asking questions, stopped looking for answers. I already had everything I needed. All that was left was timing. I started small, quietly opening a new bank account, redirecting my paychecks, meeting a lawyer during my lunch breaks, telling her everything while trying not to break down in her office. She listened carefully, then said, "When you leave, make sure you control the narrative. Don't give her the chance to rewrite your story." Those words stuck with me. At home, I was the picture of calm. I made jokes at dinner, helped Ethan with his homework, even complimented Emma's cooking. She smiled more now, believing whatever storm had passed. But what she didn't know was that I'd already printed everything. The photos from the iPad, the messages, the DNA test, even the hotel receipts. Each piece neatly filed in an envelope labeled Truth. One night, she mentioned scheduling a family photo shoot. Something sweet to capture the kids growing up. I said yes without hesitation. "It'll be nice," I told her, "to remember how far we've come." The irony almost made me laugh. That weekend, we all dressed in white. I held Lily in my arms as the photographer said, "Say cheese." And for a second, as the shutter clicked, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. She wanted a picture-perfect memory. I wanted her to have one last beautiful lie before the truth tore her world apart. That night, I tucked the kids into bed and sat in my office, staring at that sealed envelope on my desk. Tomorrow morning, I'd hand it to her, and she'd finally understand what it feels like to lose everything you thought you'd built from scratch. Sunday morning came, soft sunlight spilling through the curtains. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. I made breakfast for everyone, the smell of coffee and pancakes filling the air. Emma smiled at me from across the table, completely unaware that by the end of the day, the life she knew would be gone. When the kids ran off to play, I told her calmly, "We need to talk." She looked up, curious but not alarmed. "What's wrong?" I slid the thick manila envelope across the table. "Everything I'm about to say is in there." She frowned, then slowly opened it. First came the hotel receipts, then the photos. Her breathing hitched when she reached the messages. And then, the DNA test. Her eyes widened, scanning the page until the color drained from her face. "Jake, this isn't—" "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't insult me with another lie." For a moment, she just stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Then she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees beside the table. "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "He meant nothing, I swear. I didn't know what I was doing." I didn't move. I didn't yell. I just watched her unravel, piece by piece, the way she'd done to me for years without even noticing. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I finally said. "You just didn't think you'd get caught." She reached for my hand, crying harder now. "Please, Jake, please don't leave. The kids need you. I need you." I stood up, sliding my chair back slowly. "Lily will always have me, as someone who loves her, not as her father. Ethan will know the truth when he's old enough. As for you—" I paused at the doorway, her sobs echoing behind me. "You taught me how to live without love. Now I'm just taking what's left of my peace." And I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage she built alone. But even then, I didn't realize how strange peace would feel when it finally arrived. It's been 8 months since that morning. 8 months since I walked out of the house that used to feel like home. I rent a small apartment now, bare walls, mismatched furniture, but it's quiet, honest. Every corner feels like mine. No secrets. No buzzing phones turned face down. Just stillness. I see Ethan every week. We build Lego towers, watch superhero movies, and he tells me about school like nothing ever changed. With Lily, it's different. She's too young to understand. When I visit, she runs to me yelling, "Uncle Jake!" a title Emma and I agreed on to make things easier. Every time she says it, my chest aches, but I smile anyway, because her laughter isn't her fault. None of this is. Emma still tries. Emails, voicemails, long apologies that sound like prayers from someone who finally learned regret too late. She says she's in therapy, says she's changed, says she wants to make things right. But you can't rebuild trust from ashes. Not when the foundation was a lie. I don't hate her anymore. Hate takes energy, and I've wasted enough of mine. What I feel now is quieter. Acceptance. Sometimes I drive past our old street at night. The house glows from the windows, and I can almost hear the life we used to have. For a moment, I grieve the version of me who believed love could survive anything. Then I remember that silence. The one that started with late-night texts and ended with a DNA test. And I know I did the right thing. One evening, I burned the last photo from our wedding, watched the edges curl until nothing was left but smoke. Then I walked outside, the cool air hitting my face, and for the first time in years, I breathed without weight on my chest. She thought the truth would break me, I said quietly to myself. But it set me free, and I kept walking, toward a life I finally knew was mine.